Hey everybody, this is Jay Evans, and you are listening to the Jay Evans Thoughtcast, seeking encouragement and sometimes talking about taboo conversation. Today we have got Trey Van Camp on the podcast, and I am so excited. I have followed him since I discovered him through Pro Church Tools. So I'm excited to have him on. We have DM'd back and forth on Instagram for a few months. And as you know, if you listen to the podcast, I'm a big advocate of, if you want to start something, just go for it. Just kind of figure it out as you go. And Trey's got a bunch of really cool stories from, he pastors a church and a movie theater to going to a Casey Neistat event. So lots of exciting things to talk about. But the one thing that I admire most about you is I remember in one of your video interviews, you said that after the Casey Neistat interview, a lot of people said, I would subscribe to you, but you talk about Jesus.
Yes.
So kind of talk about that, what it's like to really go through something like that.
Yeah. First of all, thank you.
And share the story behind it too. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Thanks for letting me on, man. I appreciate everything that you do. I love your thoughts. So I thought that was perfect the way you described this podcast. So let's jump into that story. So Casey Neistat, he gave a shout out to this guy named Dustin Anderson. Dustin is a quadriplegic. And so Casey had those Nike Auto Lace shoes. And he's like, these are great. But Casey in his Casey fashion's like, I don't need these. I need to give this to somebody else. So I think a ton of people submitted why they should receive those shoes. But my friend Dustin got that shout out, and he got the shoes. I've got to see those shoes. They're pretty cool. And he's actually wasn't my friend until Casey Neistat shouted him out. So that day I was like, that is so cool. So I just looked him up on Instagram and saw that he was actually a believer as well. His whole channel was called Disciple Recovery. And so his whole, aspect of it is now living, because he lived for 20 years being able to walk, but then he actually had an accident on a slip and slide of all things. So it's pretty terrifying. And so he got paralyzed from that. And so he just kind of recorded his journey. Well, anyways, I just hit him on Instagram, just like how you and I have communicated. Mm-hmm. And I just told him, hey, I think your story's incredible. I really believe God put you here on this platform for a purpose. I just pray that, God, strengthens you, gives you wisdom on how to move forward. Cause he immediately went from, was it 1,000 subs to 50,000 subs in one day, which is insane. And so quickly after that, after we gained a relationship, he gave me a shout out. So I like to say I got the grandson of a Casey Neistat shout out. You know what I mean? It's like a hockey assist? That's what I got. And so from that day, it was actually only 6 months into me vlogging, he gave me a shout out, how he enjoyed my content. And so I got a bunch of people, more than I've ever gotten on my channel. Even Brady Shearer shout outs didn't get as much as this, Dustin shout out, because he had a lot of attention at that time. It was it was his 5th video he made ever since the Casey shout out. And so, but yeah, I got so much, I don't want to say hate, because I feel like people get way worse hate than that. But so many were like, man, I love your cinematography. I love your, your personality. I love the style, but you talk about Jesus way too much. And so, I guess I had a decision to make there of let me just take I'm a pastor, but I don't have to do it on the channel. I can, do my own thing. I was like, why? I would be so dissatisfied. So I just told him, okay, I'm not for everybody. That's totally fine. And that's honestly been a thing I've struggled a lot in the YouTube world. You can get a lot further if you're not talking about Christ, but I love the scripture. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? So that's something I really adhere to. And so even I guess we'll talk about that story along with it. I guess, 6 months fast forward, Dustin got invited to New York City with, Casey Neistat. It was a Samsung event. So Samsung paid for everything. And he was allowed to bring 50 of his closest creator friends, people that he thought were influential, people that he enjoyed. So you had people there like David Dobrik. You had Molly Burke, which she has millions of subscribers now. You have Jody Still, which she's an incredible artist. You had MKBHD. You had, all these people that a lot of people know of. They were there at the event. Well, Dustin was able to go. And then he could bring a +1. So of all people, he hit me up and said, hey, if you can figure out a way to get to New York City, I have the rest of it paid for. And so actually my YouTube subscribers paid the $600 to get me to New York City when at 2 days notice, by the way. That's how Casey operates.
Yeah.
Samsung gave everybody else a 3-day notice. I had a 2-day notice because I guess the Holy Spirit took a day to convince Dustin he needed to take me. But it was great, man. It was so cool. I had a really great gospel conversations with him. And what's so cool is I was able to use the YouTube platform was how we connected, how we related to each other. And I was able to speak on their level. I wasn't their level, but I was able to have their kind of lingo and really relate to them and really use those as inroads to gospel conversations that I'm still praying, really bears fruit for eternity. And so, yeah, I'm so thankful for that opportunity. I've been waiting for another one of those moments. It's been a while. It's been over a year since I've had something like that happen, but it was great. I guess those Brady Shearer shout outs have been my highlight for this past year.
Yeah.
Finding people like you. So, yeah.
Yeah. So when did you start vlogging? Like when, how long have you been at it?
Yeah, so you talk a lot about starting and the emphasis on that, and I love it. So I actually found out about, of all people, Casey Neistat was the first person on YouTube I ever really found. I thought YouTube was for cat videos, so it was actually October of 2016. I was like, oh my gosh, why hasn't anybody told me about this thing called vlogging? I've never heard of it. I was never in that world at all. And so November is when I started my first vlog. So I had 1 month of just consuming a bunch of literally only Casey Neistat stuff. And I was like, wow, are any Christians doing this? So I started searching it online. Couldn't find any real Christian people who were vlogging in the sense of like how Casey was, how it was a holistic, your whole life. And so that really bothered me. I was like, man, maybe I'm supposed to do this. I spent a lot of time behind the camera, but not any in front of it. But I'm a communicator. I'm a preacher. So I was like, this should work. So I vlogged a few times in November, December, January, February, like 4 or 5 times a month. And then March of 2017, I did every single day in March Madness. And ever since then, I've uploaded at least 3 times a week since that time, which has been crazy. So I think I'm at like over 350 videos on YouTube since, November 2016.
Yeah. And so how have you kept it consistent that long with 3 kids, a wife, you're pastoring a church? So, like when life gets crazy stressful and you're, weighing the pros and cons, how has vlogging stayed in that?
Yeah. So a quick answer is I don't play video games. I barely watch TV. I get rest by working, if that makes sense. I'm actually really into Sabbathing lately. And so
me too.
I've had to really rest better with that, which would be interesting because I'm daily again in April. But anyways, I do believe there's a difference between laziness and rest. And for me, editing is a very restful experience for me. It's like a hobby. I enjoy it. So if anything, it's kind of there's times in ministry where it's just super discouraging. The numbers aren't there like you think there should be. People have betrayed you. People have left. And almost an anchor in a sense is being able to like, well, I know God is still using me, maybe not locally as much as I'd like, but it's really cool to see how he's still been able to use my struggles and the things I'm learning on a bigger scale, that aren't in my city. So that's kind of been an encouraging thing for me to push through. But I think just discipline. Like my father has always grown up. I've always like, if you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. So for me, it's ingrained in my DNA, just that there is no excuses. Like if you said you're going to do it, you're going to do it. That's why I say I'm going to do it. That way I want to do it. And I don't know. I just think there's so many, just the comments, the people who I've been able to engage in gospel conversations with or encourage people to continue in their walk really honestly keeps me going. It's like, this is worth it, So that's a big part of it. I don't know. I can go on and on. But I enjoy it. It's a hobby of mine. I would never want this to be a full-time career because I think the local church is worth dying for and pouring into. I could see YouTube eventually quitting, but I'd rather not. I think it's fun. So that's why I keep doing it.
Yeah. So your family is actively involved in like all of your vlogs.
Yeah.
Has your wife always been like super into the vlogs? Because I know like my wife, I tried my hand at vlogs and she's like, that's cool, just never put me in the video.
Right. It was honestly like that in the beginning. It was never, she was never like, this is stupid that you're doing it. She was always so supportive. I love my wife. She knew what she got into when she married me. I'm constantly, I'm a 7. I'm demanding the center of attention. I don't know if you're an Enneagram guy, but
yep, I'm a 5.
Yeah, you're a 5. Yes, I remember that from your Instagram story. So anyways, so I'm a 7, so I'm here for the party. So, but I digress. I would honestly say within the last year, my wife has not only been okay with it, but she like thinks of vlog ideas. She's the one who says, get your camera out. I got something funny to say. I think it's great. It is so fun. Yeah. So practice makes personal is what I say a lot in when I teach some pastors how to vlog. And so I've really noticed that with my wife, like just doing it over and over. Now she sees the personal side of it. Now it doesn't seem fake and she actually enjoys it. And she feels like she's tied into the community as much as I am. So that's been so fun. Because at first, everybody's camera shy at first.
Right.
So it's been fun to see her blossom that way for sure.
And she has a podcast too now, doesn't she?
Yeah, she's killing the game. Actually, so my associate pastor, Caleb, his wife is Shelby. And so Jordan and Shelby, the pastors' wives of our church have a podcast together called Cultivate Women's Podcast. And it's really the desire to cultivate a life that's rooted in Christ. So they talk a lot about the problems that women go through. And it's super well produced. I'm super impressed. Way better than my podcast. I think it's awesome. So I'm proud of her. She already has like a bunch in the queue and everything's scheduled. It's incredible.
One thing I think my favorite content that you produce is the leadership workshops. Awesome. Where it's like you guys sitting in a circle. And ever since I saw like the first one, I've been thinking of how to do something like that in my church. Because you guys do it in your church, right? Yeah. So what made you, because that's probably my favorite content that you produce, and I usually listen to it. So what made you want to start doing that? Because that's kind of unconventional to do something like that. Because I mean, like, there's screaming kids and everything, and that always makes me laugh when I hear that.
Yeah, so that's when I don't think things through, and I'm too cheap to pay for a babysitter, or I assume people won't bring their kids, but they wind up bringing them. So I'm glad you said that. It's one of the things I'm actually most passionate about in the content I create, but it doesn't always. It's very much a deep, not a wide thing that I do for my channel. My vlogs get more attention, get more views, but I love the feedback and like the help that I bring to people with the workshop. So I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I really want to develop a culture at our Church of Excellence, and I really want to pour into our people. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be pouring into our leaders, why don't I turn on the camera and pour into people beyond? And then when it got to that part, I was like, I think environments really matter. So I want to make this environment pretty for the video, but I also think even just the people coming will enjoy it too. Like they enjoy being a part of something bigger than what we have. So yeah, it was just kind of like, I'm going to see if anybody watches this. I'm not sure. I love leadership. So we've done leadership, and then we also did like a communication workshop, and those were just so fun for me to create. And so, yeah, I just like, let's just see what other people do. There's actually a couple churches in Virginia that use it as small group curriculum because not only do I have the 30-minute session, but also in the show notes, I have downloads where, because it was for our leaders. So it was a very comprehensive, this week you're going to read 3 chapters from Costly Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and here's some questions you have to process. And we have in the leadership workshop, when I was done, we had about like 50 people there, and they all were in different tables, and they were a small group discussion. So we created a whole thing for that. And so it's cool that like, okay, it wasn't just for our 50 people. Other people in churches, wherever are using it as well. So that's been a huge blessing for us for sure. Right. It's been very enjoyable.
That's one of my favorite things I think about the internet right now, because like a lot of your podcasts are your sermons. And it's really easy to just pull your sermon audio and put it out there. And I think you've made a big impact on me when you've talked about sticky statements. And so like, because people's attention spans are so small, but and I think about that as I'm crafting sermons or podcasts, I'm like, where is the sticky statement?
Love it
here? And I always see yours when I'm scrolling through, and sometimes I'm like, oh, Trey. And sometimes I'm like,
That's funny. Yeah, I totally expect sometimes where it's like, I get it. Maybe this one was a little bit too far on the teacher side. Oh, well,
But
that's hilarious.
I remember them like, and the funny thing is about them, and you talk about how they rhyme.
Uh-huh.
And you talked about that in one of your workshops. And I'm
Yeah.
always just like, there's something about the rhyming in it that just makes it stick out more.
Yeah, I know. And I finally, I don't know, it's the way my brain works. Like I wanted so badly to be a preacher that uses illustrations,
Mm-hmm.
that is able to just like, you see this ball, and they all of a sudden, like, now you just like learn about the grace of God somehow, some
Mm-hmm.
crazy way. I don't know how to do that. I can't.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not as good at that. But even in my own devotional times, I just can't help but like word craft some things
Yeah.
in my own prayers. So it's like, I think this is the way, God, that you've created me. So I'm just going to go full force. I was so terrified that people would just make fun of me all the time.
Yeah.
And people most assuredly do. Let's not, let's be real about that. But I also think that, I don't know, like you said, the whole goal behind it is that people would remember what I'm saying and stay focused. So I think it served me in that. And I'm thankful for it. There's only been a few weeks where nothing rhymed or alliterated or nothing. And I just felt like it wasn't a sermon. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Is this a real I don't know. This doesn't feel real because it doesn't rhyme.
If you're wondering what any of Trey's sticky statements are, here's a few. Repentance is the entrance to abundance.
Amen.
I like that one. I haven't seen that one yet. Our prayers have the weight to completely change our fate. Sabbath is sacred time when we stop working, stop wanting, and stop worrying. And it's funny that you say that that's something you've been thinking on, because I have too lately. And it's frustrating because it's so easy to get interrupted. And
Yeah.
I can't say in my life I'm very good at being a brick wall in many areas. I mean, I would say I'm pretty protective of my wife,
Mm.
but like we go for Saturdays, and I mean, we've been convicted about it for probably a month or two, and I don't think there's been one Sabbath where we've been like, I feel pretty good about that one.
Yeah.
So how has that process been for you? Because you said
Yeah.
you've been thinking
I
about
love
it.
talking about that. Yeah. So I even mentioned to my friend the other day, so I had a very good Sabbath this past weekend, but the weekend before
Mm,
was terrible. I was very depleted, and it actually brought into my Sunday. So I try to keep up with like the Jewish calendar. Not just it just is convenient for me. I don't
mhm,
think it matters which day or the time. I think 24 hours is helpful. So I do 20 minutes before sundown on Friday through 20 minutes before sundown on Saturday. And my emphasis that I used to just think that Sabbath was just, oh yeah, like pick a day where you have fun, where you don't work.
mm,
But I didn't really focus on God on those days. I just focused on not working. And so that's why I talked about how it's not wanting, like it's not coveting. It's another
mm,
word, spending the day thanking God, just looking at my children and just saying, wow, God, thank you. Just over and over, thank you for that. Like you're just
mhm,
so good. Just focusing on his goodness, stop worrying. I talk about that. Like, so for me, a big part of it is playing worship music. Another thing is I read a book. Usually I try to read just as much as I can. Um, just in a book that it's enjoyable. It's not going to help my sermon. It's not going to help anything, but it's just going to kind of feed my soul.
mhm,
So those are some things that are helpful. Honestly, a resource that was helpful for me was Keeping the Sabbath Holy.
mm,
WH Holy, not, the other. Keeping the Sabbath Holy by Marva J. Dawn. And she actually analyzes you can the Hebrew word Shabbat can be translated in 4 different ways, and so she looks at those 4 different words
mm,
and how we need to incorporate Sabbath in our daily schedule. Something I thought was interesting, a professor from U of A, I'm from Arizona, so University of Arizona, said that it seems as if our human clock is based off of a 25-hour clock. So in other words, I think we all can attest to that in this point of like, we're just exhausted. We always feel like the day is a little bit ahead of us. We always feel like we just didn't get enough done. And so spending one day a week just resetting that clock is so helpful. And it's able to kind of realign your priorities. And I think Louis Giglio talked about this a lot, how we're not working so that, okay, the weekend's coming, like Sabbath's coming, then we'll
Mm-hmm.
rest. We're operating from rest. Like I'm going through, even through Friday, still excited and pumped because of the rest I had last week.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different way of looking at it. I'm operating from rest, not to the rest. And it's been super helpful just for me. I just believe Jesus when he says, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Right. Yeah. And I think, I don't know. I think we've lost that. And I think that promise isn't just for heaven. I think that promise also holds weight in the now. So I've been very convicted about that because a lot of my life has been marked by anxiety, by being hurried. And we block the Holy Spirit when we walk in a hurried spirit. And so that's something I've really been focusing on a lot lately.
Mm-hmm. What kind of brought you to thinking about the Sabbath and wanting to practice it?
Yeah, that's great. Honestly, it's only been about a 3-month journey. So it's honestly, oh man, I picked up Jeff Bethke talked about it a lot, like on his podcast.
Yep.
I haven't jumped into it too much though. My wife would always be like, listen to Jeff Bethke here. And so I listened a little bit, but not really. I'm not going to give him the credit, even though he probably deserves it because he was the one that talked about it a lot. John Mark Comer has been really influential for me, seeing some of his stuff, but mainly like Dallas Willard. I've been like, there's been a stream of people lately that influenced me a lot. Marvin J. Don, Dallas Willard, John Mark Comer. I would even throw Bethke in there, but I've just been really refreshed by that kind of emphasis on rest. So yeah, I guess those would be the 4.
Yeah, I was kind of on the fence about it. Like if I get a free Sabbath, this is how I'll, kind of observe it or whatever. And John Mark Comer had a whole series on the Sabbath. And I listened to everyone in that sermon series. And by the end of it, I was like talking to my wife about it. How does your family kind of get unified around a goal towards a Sabbath? Because it can be kind of easy. And that's an area where my wife and I are trying to figure out, what are kind of like our, let me say, disciplines that we want to practice around the Sabbath. How has your family kind of been, does that make sense to kind of?
No, totally.
Okay.
Yeah. So we actually we rest differently. So we actually have time where I'm also very introverted in some senses. I feel like I'm what do they call it? Ambivert. Like it depends on the day. Sometimes I just need people. Other times I just don't need people. But I need to have a couple hours on the Sabbath where I'm just alone and I'm reading and I'm contemplating the things of God. And so she does her own thing. Sometimes it's hanging out with girls, getting some girl time in. It's hanging out with the kids, that kind of thing. What we share together is Friday night we're gonna have a dinner together, and that's like for sure. Phones are away, like we don't have the phone on, we don't have them near us, and we're just enjoying each other's company. What we've been doing recently is on Friday nights we invite just certain friends over, and so it's just a fun celebration of just enjoying each other's company. We're not like, it's not necessarily a game night. We're not like trying to really, impress and host. We just want to be with friends and talk, and so she actually cooks dinner, and then, but we don't do the dishes. John Mark Comer sermon. We don't do the dishes until Saturday night. I do the dishes. But then Saturday we have breakfast together. So we do very family things together. Also, there's a part where I give Jordan some alone time, and then I bring the kids into my studio. I call it a studio. I want to call it a studio. It's an office, but my studio. And we play some music and just have fun together, and that's part of my Sabbath. We dance and we sing and that kind of thing. And even last Saturday, we went to the park, just me and the girls, without my wife. And it was super fun, just some dad time. So I don't know. I think we're very much learning. This is only since the beginning of the new year, honestly. And so we're still trying to figure each other out. But thankfully, we can both rest on Saturday because some of my friends, the work schedule is so crazy, their wife can't have Sabbath on the same day. They just don't align. And so I feel really bad for them, and I feel for them. I'm thankful that I haven't had to figure that part out.
Is it hard as a pastor to Sabbath well?
Yeah, I think sadly. Well, it's hard for me because this is intentional. I Sabbath Friday night through Saturday, and then Sunday's coming. So my sermon needs to most definitely be done in time. Like I don't want to be thinking about it. And so that kind of gets me nervous sometimes on Saturday nights. I'm kind of like looking through my notes, making sure I have what I need. So it's really changed my schedule up. Like I have to be done before Friday, at 5 o'clock. So that's a little bit tough. But outside of that, no, I mean, I need that time. Like as a pastor, I just get so drained by the worries of our people, which is fine. It's what I signed up for. But in order to serve my people well, I need to have that rest. So you mentioned that, I'm very saddened. So many of my pastor friends are the most rushed, hurried, anxious people I know, and that should not be the case at all.
Yeah. Let's talk about pastoring. Talk about how long you've been pastoring and kind of ahead of that, and I know your dad's a pastor, and I'm sure that had a pretty big impact on you wanting to pastor.
Yeah. So I'm a fourth generation pastor. So my great grandfather was a pastor in Tennessee. My grandfather was a pastor in Tennessee, Missouri, then Arizona, and then now my dad. My dad picked up the call to ministry 15 years ago. Actually, this Sunday is the 15th anniversary for my dad's church, which is really
wow.
Fun. Outside of that, though, before that, he was just a construction worker, concrete business owner, which he still is, and I still do concrete on the side with him. So yeah, I actually surrendered my life to ministries a year into the church plant. I was 13 years old. And I was actually at a Discipleship Now conference. Do you guys have those? Have you ever heard of that, D Now? But where do you live, by the way? I forget.
I'm in Portland, Indiana.
Indiana. Okay,
yep.
Cool. My grandfather on the other side's from Indiana. So that's where the Van Camps are from. But anyways, I digress. So what we're talking about. Yeah, so I started my life ministries at 13. I got licensed to preach at 16. So I started speaking at different churches like once a month. I started my own thing. My senior year in high school when I was 17, I called it The Gathering, and I had a once a month gathering at my school, and we had like 150 students show up. We baptized 30 people my senior year. It was really cool. Then I went to California Baptist University for 4 years, got my degree, and then I actually came home to help my dad's church plant, and then we launched our own church in January 10th, 2016. So we're just over 3 years old now, which is crazy to think about. Church planting has been so sanctifying. It's been certain seasons exhausting, other seasons just the greatest thing ever. It's a lot. So yeah, I've been doing it. Being the lead pastor as a younger pastor actually is what pushed me into vlogging as well, to kind of gain the trust of my people. By taking one, honestly, having a lot of kids helps too. It makes me look older, but taking one look at me, it's like, how is this guy, he's not old enough to lead. And I always look at history, man, like Spurgeon. I know I'm not Spurgeon, but he had his own thing at like 19. Okay. Yeah. So not that young. So I don't know. I feel like we postpone adolescence so much, but I probably started too soon anyways. But anyways, I'm at where I'm at now. So yeah, I've been pastoring. It's a joy to preach, but it's a joy. I'm finding it more and more of a joy to shepherd the people and really form people spiritually and to push people towards Jesus. It's been, I honestly, I couldn't do anything else, which is why I do it. There's days where I wish God called me to anything else. Yeah. But I know it's where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. You're not a woman, so I'm allowed to ask, how old are you?
I'm 27. Just turned 27. My golden year.
27-year-old pastoring a church, vlogging your ministry, 3 kids. You have 3 kids?
Yeah, I got 3 now, man. 3 girls.
Man, I'm 4 years younger than you, and I didn't realize that we were that close in age.
Oh, really? So you thought I was older? Boom.
Yeah. So
the
3 kids is working.
Right?
My wife and I are foster parents, and
I've seen that.
I guess there's not that many young foster parents, because most of the time when we're contacted about what they call a placement, when a kid gets placed with you, it's all through the phone, all through text message. And so you can go a week without meeting like the case manager or anything. And every single time I meet a case manager, they're like, oh, wow, you are so much younger than I thought you were going to be.
I bet. Yeah, you got to be some of the youngest ever. That's incredible that you do that, man. That is so cool. We have a family that just recently took that step, and it hasn't been easy for sure, but it's been a beautiful, oh man, it's just so cool to see how they've changed this girl's life already. It's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that you do that. That's awesome.
It's one of those things, people ask me what it's like, and I kind of found my sticky statement for it. And I tell them it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and I love it.
I love that.
Like there is, I mean, they try to prepare you. I mean, there's whole entire classes where they're like, this is how hard it's going to be. These are things you could go through. And like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, that sounds horrible. And it still doesn't prepare you. But like, at the end of the day, I'm like, I know this is my calling and this is my ministry
Yeah, right on.
right
That's
now.
great.
And it's funny to see God's timing throughout that. And that's a whole nother podcast. But I do think it's
Yeah.
cool that you and your dad are doing concrete while you're pastoring. And that reminds me a lot of Paul, and he was the tent maker. So, and what I noticed was that you said your dad started pastoring like 15 years ago. So he kind of did it a little later on in his life.
Yeah.
So how old were you? I guess I could do the math, but you were, I mean, you didn't really like grow up really
I
as
grew
a
up
pastor's
normal.
kid. Yeah.
I grew up normal is what I tell people. Yeah. So I was 12 when he took that call. I've always been a pastor's grandkid. I mean,
Right.
my grandfather was like a legend in the state of Arizona for the ministry he did. And so I've always been around ministry. My dad was always a deacon and highly involved in church, Sunday school teacher. But he claims, I mean, it's what he says. I believe it, that he believes God called him to preach a long time ago, and he just kept putting it off. I'll just keep doing Sunday school, and guess what? On concrete, I'm making a lot of money. I'm helping fund the ministry of the church. God, that's what you need me to do. And he finally just surrendered to the call and realized, okay, God, like you're calling me to plant this church. So that's when he took that step of obedience. It completely changed our entire family's life, but definitely for the better. But there's a lot of hard moments. You know, as a junior high kid, your life is already pretty much terrible anyway. It's a
Yeah.
stinking junior high. And then going through all that, we had to move schools and everything was in transition for that period. It was very tough. But that's when God spoke to me so much. God really got a hold of my heart. And I'm so thankful for those years in junior high and like starting out as a church plant. But I'm so thankful that they're done.
Yeah. So he planted a church too?
Yes. Yep. Church
Oh,
planter.
wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, we met in elementary school. We had a free pancake breakfast Easter Sunday, 2004, and that's what started the whole thing. We didn't even have a music guy yet. He played Chris Tomlin on CD and just
Yeah.
put the words up on those laminate projectors?
Yep.
You know,
Overhead
like
projectors.
overhead projector. That's what we did for the worship. I was the guy running through I was like, oh my gosh, like we've gone so far in the last 15 years.
I know it. So as we're kind of wrapping up, talk about Vlog Your Ministry.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, so honestly, a passion of mine, Sean Cannell. So he's a big YouTuber, and we started hitting up each other on DM, which I thought was really cool. And he said a saying that really got a hold of me. He said, "I love what you're doing. We need 1,000 more Trey Van Camps." And so I knew what he meant by that. Lord knows we don't need another Trey Van Camp, but that's way too much rhyming in this world. However, can you imagine? But I was like, wow, I have learned, like I talk to so many pastors and they like what I'm doing. They just don't know where to start. They have no idea how I got started, how I did it. So I started thinking through, how can I help pastors? And so I was praying through it and I was thinking, okay, let me just start. Like, if I had a conference, what would I teach them? So I came up with 6 different lessons, 6 different, like sessions, kind of like my leadership workshops. And I started processing those things and I made the videos and I made some like helpful content, helpful tips. And I realized like, hey, I want to help pastors save the 2 years that I've spent of researching videos, trying to find the latest thing. How do I get music? Like all these things that stop pastors from blogging. So I was like, this would be really cool if the domain vlogyourministry.com is open, and it was. So I snagged it and I created an online course. And so we've brought 27 pastors through it so far.
Wow.
So it's been great. And they're starting to press upload, which is fun. So I actually, just before on here, I was just on a session with 10 pastors about Vlog Your Ministry. So it's 6 sessions. They watch the content, they take notes, and then we have 6 Zoom calls where we just do a Q&A. I like to call them Q and Trey, but Q&A for an hour long, and we just go back and forth, like editing questions. Storytelling is the main thing. What are those? How do you storytell? What are some places to get? I don't know. It's been really fun. We've had people from all around America, and also we have like missionaries in Mexico that are using it. Yeah, we have people who are in urban environments, who are in the ghetto, and then those who are just like in the super top, upper class, like everything. It's been really, really unique how we have like a lot of bilingual pastors in the course. So it's been fun. It's been really cool. So yeah, vloggerministry.com. It's been a blessing for sure.
Yeah, I was looking at it before the interview, and the money that you're spending just to learn Premiere Pro is worth the price.
Right?
I tried to get into Premiere Pro like 2 or 3 times, and I just got so frustrated every single time. And like twice, I'd install it and just kind of be like,
yeah.
What do I do?
I've had Premiere for 8 years now. So I'm able to help people by saying, like, I get it. Like, I honestly don't even remember the first time I opened all my questions. So just ask me, what do you have? Like, what questions do you have? Yeah. And I'll help you. This is my process. And so it's been good. It's been, I'm just praying a lot of people get saved from it. A lot of pastors, their ministry gets built from it. Like, I don't know. I just think we can go further faster by blogging and gaining people's trust. And yeah, so it's exciting.
So you could call them your vlog disciples.
Yeah, I'll come up with a better rhyme for that. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's a privilege, man. Some of these pastors, they're way better than me and everything else. But thankfully, I have the corner of the market when it comes to videoing, so I'm able to help them in some way or fashion. So it's been good. Even like that Christian vlogger, he has like 80,000 subs. Mm-hmm. He took the course. So stuff like that. So it's cool. So we've had kind of everybody, all sorts of different ranges have taken the course.
Yeah. As throughout this interview, I'm laughing at some of the things that we have in common that I never even, because I followed you on, I don't know how long we've been connected on Instagram, but you've said so many things where I'm like, huh. But when you said that you and Sean Cannell were DMing back and forth, and I know that you're a Gary Vee fan, and he says, if you want to connect with someone, send them a DM. The worst they can say is no. And my wife and I were talking the other day, and but like yesterday, we were talking about the warm weather in Arizona, and I said, "Oh, I have a family friend that's down in Instagram," and I said, "And I have a kind of an acquaintance friend through Instagram," and I said, "And he pastors a church and a movie theater, and I would love to go down there." And my wife goes, "Have you had him on your podcast yet?" And I'm like, I didn't even think of that. And I pulled out my phone and I typed it in and I said, well, let's do a podcast interview. And I was like, worst he can say is no. And you were like, yes. Right. And I was like, even better.
Yeah. Right. Ask and you shall receive. Yeah. I mean, I've had so many opportunities. Just like, that's how I got the Case of Neistat thing. The whole New York City thing was from the stinking Instagram DMs. So it's going down in the DMs, like Gary Vee says.
just DM somebody. Well, Trey, thanks so much for being on my podcast. I think it's awesome. I consider myself a fan of, I'm subscribed to your YouTube channel, your podcast. We're connected on Instagram. So I really enjoy your content, and I'm not saying that to butter you up. So thanks,
thanks, man.
Thanks so much for being on my podcast.
Of course.